come at you in a lot of different ways, lots of different angles. So it's a big mental test for Carson Wentz and this Eagles offense today. There's a lot that they have to make sure they have buttoned up, primarily on third down.
All right, let's take a look at the offensive starters here for the Eagles. And for the first time this season, for the second week in a row, it's going to be the same offensive line. So some cohesiveness there. Fran, let's break down this wide receiver group a little bit here. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is back and active. He's on the depth chart here as the starter, but we could also see a lot of Travis Fulgham today. Of course, he had that big catch from last week. His name has been in everyone's mouth all week. And then Eagles rookie Quez Watkins is active for the first time this season as well, too. So a lot of young wide receivers, and that's just kind of par for the course with this team.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to mix all of these guys in. So, who knows how the snap counts will look at the end of the day. Who knows how the target share will look at the end of the day. But they're all going to be incorporated in some way, shape, or form into this game plan. Great to see Quez Watkins out there for the first time. He did some really nice things this summer, and he brings another explosive element to this Eagles offense. John Hightower led the receivers group in snaps last week. Remember, he had that key fourth down conversion late in the game that led to the Travis Fulgham touchdown. But when you have Quez Watkins on the field, I mean, this guy's got legit 4.3 speed. He's got pretty good size. I'm excited to see what he looks like here in his first NFL action. I wouldn't expect too much, but I'm excited to see what he looks like.
Oh, and Miles Sanders has had this game circled on his calendar for a long time. The Pittsburgh native is excited to be playing in his hometown in a stadium where he played in high school. Excited to represent the Eagles today back in his hometown, and of course with some fans there. I know he has been super excited for this one. He will be a big part of today's game as well. We were talking about the wide receivers, and Darius Slay, Eagles cornerback, is a quote machine. He had an awesome quote about Travis Fulgham. He said, "The catch didn't surprise me. I've just been waiting for him to come out of his little cocoon." And I think that's a great metaphor, because we're seeing a lot of these guys really take those next steps in their development, especially when it comes to this young offensive line. And let me highlight Nate Herbig here, because Jason Kelsey gave him a lot of high praise this week, saying he's very cerebral. There's a lot going on upstairs. He kind of laughed and said, don't watch his 40 at the combine, but he makes up for it by taking better angles and knowing the game.
And for someone that watched that 40 at the combine, yeah, just file that one away. Put that in like the Tom Brady archives. You don't want to watch that one anymore. But you can tell a guy is cerebral when he's got that ability to play multiple positions along the offensive line. Nate Herbig came out. He started at right guard early this season. They make that switch midweek last week to get him over to left guard so that Matt Pryor can slide in at right guard. He's backed up Jason Kelsey at center as well. So that's what he brings to the table. He's going to have a big test this week, as I mentioned. That Pittsburgh front, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later as well in my key to the game. They do a lot of different things. So him and Jordan Milata, the communication must be up to speed in this matchup. They've got to be able to see things quickly, process it, and communicate it to the guy on the other side of them.
All right, and as we're watching some of the defensive line warm up, let's take a look at the defensive starters. And of course, that defensive line for the Eagles is also going to be key. The Eagles this week, again, without Avonte Maddox, so some challenges there for the secondary, but it's next man up. Jalen Mills, I thought, had a great quote this week talking about the challenge of the Steelers offense. He said it starts and ends with Ben Roethlisberger. He gets the ball out fast. Affecting him is key. And, of course, this defensive line is going to be trying to do just that. I felt like last week we saw a lot of these guys take a next step. Derek Barnett had a great job. We saw big plays from some of the young guys, Hassan Ridgeway, Jannard Avery, Josh Sweat. A lot of depth there, and these guys seem to be taking the next step, some of these young guys.
Yeah, no question. The defensive line is the engine that makes this defense go. Real quickly, before we get too far away from that defensive starter graphic, you may have noticed some different names there in the back seven. Rookie Sean Bradley, he is next up on the depth chart at Mike linebacker behind TJ Edwards. We'll see what that rotation looks like. I would expect we'll see plenty of Alex Singleton. Perhaps Nate Gary slides in to the middle linebacker spot, so that's something I'll be watching here late in this game. Sean Bradley did play a decent amount last week against San Francisco, but keep in mind, San Francisco, they force defenses to play a lot with 3 and 4 linebackers. And I think when you look at this Pittsburgh offense, they play a little bit more spread out. They've got a lot of receivers, so expect to see less linebackers and more DBs on the field. which the second part of that graphic, we saw the cornerbacks. We saw Jalen Mills at safety next to Rodney McLeod, and we saw Cravon LeBlanc as the starter opposite Darius Slay. Obviously, Jalen Mills played corner last week. We'll see what that rotation looks like this week, or if they decide to stick with what they did a week ago. But obviously, look, a lot of mixing and moving parts due to injury on that back seven.
Well, and you're seeing young guys stepping up all over the field, and we saw some of rookie Kayvon Wallace last week in that secondary as well. And look, you mentioned Alex Singleton. He also had, in my opinion, the play of the game, and just a guy who's been here working hard for a long time. You're always excited to see a guy have a play like that. Let me highlight Javon Hargrave, because I mentioned him a little bit earlier as well. He, of course, is going back to his former team, and he talked to the media this week. He had a big smile on his face at the thought of getting to go after Ben Roethlisberger, his former quarterback. He said, "I look forward to finally being able to bring him down, because when you're practicing there in Pittsburgh," he said, "if you get close to Ben, if you touch number 7, you are in big trouble." So I'm excited to get after this guy. Let's talk a little bit about Ben Roethlisberger and his game when it comes to rushing the quarterback. He can be a tough guy to take down.
He's just a big, strong guy, so it is tough to get him down. You can watch them on film and see over the years, him having 2, 3, 4 defenders on his back, at his feet, around his knees, on his throwing arm, and him still being able to shake out of it or deliver a throw with those bodies around him. And that's one of the things that has made him such an effective quarterback over the course of the last few years of his career, certainly throughout the course of his entire career. Injuries have hurt him over the last couple of seasons. We'll see. He looks healthy so far. He's throwing it pretty well. They're not a downfield passing attack. They do want to get the ball out of his hands quickly and then kind of rely on that downhill run game. But, Ben Roethlisberger, you have to be able to get to him and affect him. That's the case with most NFL games.
Well, and I think the story with Ben throughout his career is that when he is healthy, he plays at a very high level. He takes this team to the next level, and this season he seems to be feeling really good after missing most of last season with an injury. And I don't know if we mentioned this earlier. I don't think we did, but the Steelers are coming off an unexpected bye, a rescheduled game due to COVID, so they've had some extra time to prepare for the Eagles. Mike Tomlin, 9-4 after a bye, but I thought that I should come up with an Eagles stat to try to make a little comparison there. It's a little bit weak, but Doug Peterson after a Pacific Coast time zone game is 4-1. So I'm gonna jokingly call that one a wash, Fran. But in all seriousness, the Steelers have had some extra time to prepare for the Eagles. And look, this is just going to be what it is this season, with teams continuing to roll with the punches, the rescheduling, putting players' safety first in terms of the virus, and teams have to be adaptable.
And while that bye week was, certainly you don't like facing a team off a bye, that was an unexpected bye for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They were not going into last week mentally prepared, and that seems silly to say, but to have that bye week kind of thrust upon them when they weren't necessarily expecting it, and then also thinking, man, that bye week's early. Now we got to play 13 straight games. There's guys not feeling too great about that. We'll see if that affects them in this game. But yeah, I think when you look at it, you absolutely mentioned it right. The adaptability is going to be huge for every team in the NFL this season. Doug Peterson's talked about it. Every coach in the league is talking about it right now. Every team has to be ready for the unexpected in this 2020 season.
All right, and here we have Jordan Milata, who made his first start in the NFL at left tackle last week, looking to build on what was a pretty solid performance for, and I know we are going to be breaking him down throughout the show, but just quick thoughts on, he's now going into his second game as a starter in the NFL, building on a pretty solid performance, I'd say.
I mean, he's listed 6'8", 345 pounds. Lane Johnson said this week that whatever his listed weight is, it's higher than that. I think when you look at Milata, he's just so big and so tough to get around. At the end of the day, when you have a guy that's that big and moves that well, it's difficult to get past him. And I think that we saw some of that. Was it perfect? No. But I thought that even the negatives, you saw that he was able to overcome that. That will not always be the case. He's going to take his lumps. Could be this week, could be next week, could be 5 weeks from now, could be a year from now. That's the nature of playing offensive line in the NFL. You are not going to bat 1,000 every single time you step out there. You're going to get beat. It's about how you recover from that. Are you able to kind of flush that and keep going? I'm interested to see Jordan Milata continue to develop over the course of the next couple of weeks.
All right, it looked like he and Fletcher Cox were just breaking down that huddle. I'm going to imply based on the head nod there from Milata that he was singing. That was a little riff. We know he's a great singer. He has a great voice. He loves to sing. This offensive line is going to be facing, we talked about this Steelers front, but this is a defense that is good at all three levels. And one thing to highlight, they are first in rushing defense. They're allowing just 54 yards per game. Miles Sanders, Pittsburgh native, is going to be going up against that defense today. Since he's been back since his debut in week 2, 5th in the NFL in rushing yards with 236. And Jalen Mills said earlier this week about Miles, to me, he's a bigger wide receiver playing running back. He is a key part of this offense today, Fran.
Yeah, and they've got to get him going both in the run game and the passing game. I think we've seen some really good things from him on the ground. They've really mixed things up in terms of their run schemes. They will need to do that against this Pittsburgh defensive front. You mentioned they're only letting up 54 yards per game on the ground right now. I think some of that is due to not just the teams they play, but the situations. You know, Pittsburgh gets up a little bit early. These other teams abandon the run. They don't have the best offensive lines to begin with those three teams that they've played, but still a very, very formidable front there. That defensive front, the defensive line, and those linebackers. You have Devin Bush, former first-round pick, Vince Williams, a guy that's a young veteran in this league that is a really effective player. It's a very good group there over in Pittsburgh, especially in the front seven.
Yeah, this team is second in total defense in the NFL, allowing 290 yards per game. They are also 5th in points per game allowed with just 19.3. So a tough challenge there for the Eagles. And as the Eagles start to head back inside, we will do the same. We will bring it back in studio. And thanks again to our friends at PA Lottery for bringing us the live look at the warm-ups. And it's now time to bring in another member of our team, our beloved Eagles insider, Dave Spadaro, coming to us from the balcony of the NovaCare Complex. Dave, it's been a pretty mixed history, the Eagles and the Steelers. So let's start there. Take us back to the last game the Eagles faced Ben Roethlisberger, 2016, a very different Eagles team.
Yeah, those were the first 3 games of Carson Wentz's Eagles career. The Eagles flew into the bye week after just destroying the Steelers. And really, Amy, was interesting when you look at the history of Ben Roethlisberger, such success. Against the Eagles, he's only 2-2. He's got 3 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions, and the Eagles have sacked him 14 times. And so they kind of have a formula here. Get up into the grill of Ben Roethlisberger and try to get him off of his spot because he's not going to run away from the pressure. I think it's interesting to note that the Eagles feel that they've got a pretty good book on what to do against Ben Roethlisberger. We'll see what Jim Schwartz has planned today.
Yeah, and you talk about that 2016 matchup. I remember what the Eagles did against Antonio Brown in that game. That was a big Jalen Mills game in his rookie season. So when we talk about 2016, take us to 2020, Dave. What's your big storyline for this matchup?
Well, I think the storyline is how in the world will the Eagles score points with an offense, look, the wide receiver core. Greg Ward has a career of 45 catches. John Hightower has 5 catches. There's just nothing there. Like, there's no. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside has 10 catches in his career. I mean, this is such a young group. Quez Watkins. So what is Doug Peterson going to do creatively? We saw last week going for the 2-point conversion in the first quarter, getting Carson Wentz designed runs. His touchdown run was a thing of beauty. Today, I expect the Eagles to get the football out of Carson's hands very quickly. I expect them to try to establish the screen game and, of course, try to get that run game going. But that screen game is so important against the big Pittsburgh Steelers pass rush. I think it's ultra, ultra important that Carson is on his game, gets the ball out quickly, and the receivers and he are on the same page. A very young group of wide receivers today.
Well, obviously plenty for Philadelphia to focus on in this one. For you, Dave, what does it all come down to for the Eagles today?
Amy, I mean, look, this is a team that has to be team brawl. It's got to be a backyard brawl kind of football team. That's the mentality. So to me, it comes down to the defensive line. 13 sacks in the last 2 weeks. Dominant play against Cincinnati. Outstanding play last week against San Francisco. Today, take advantage of some matchups up front. Get up into Ben Roethlisberger area of comfort. Force some takeaways. Don't let the tight ends beat you on the back end. And the only way that'll happen is if the Eagles dominate at the line of scrimmage. I think that's the mantra going forward for this Eagles defense. Dominate, not just win, dominate in the trenches.
I think it was Malik Jackson who said earlier this week, early in the game, we got to get up in Ben's face and give him a good Joe Burrow hit. That was what he called it. So
That's right.
We'll see if they can get it done today. Dave, thanks so much. We'll catch up with you later.
All right, guys. Thank you.
All right, Fran, Dave is looking at that defensive pressure. What do you see as a potential difference maker for Philly today?
Yeah, well, there's one big matchup that I'm really going to be focused on, and it's something we've talked about a little bit, is Jordan Milata in Act 2, right here against the Pittsburgh Steelers. We got to see him in his debut, and that's the matchup. When you look at this Pittsburgh front, Jordan Milata, who had that impressive debut, he's going to see the same couple of guys, and from a personnel standpoint, right in front of his face. You're going to get the standout edge rusher for the Pittsburgh Steelers off that left side. It's going to be Bud Dupree. TJ Watt's going to be on the other side against Lane Johnson. Bud Dupree can win with speed. He can win with power. They'll also slide the defensive end. Cam Hayward, one of the more underrated defensive linemen in the NFL. He can win in so many different ways. So you got to deal with them one-on-one. They can both win one-on-one. Then you factor in the mental stuff, right? You're going to have an ET stunt where the end crashes in and the tackle loops out. You might get a TE stunt where it's the opposite. The tackle crashes and the end loops inside. You might have a long stunt where a guy from the interior loops out to Jordan Milata. So I think when you look at this test, a lot he's got to worry about. Factor in Mike Hilton, one of the best blitzing defensive backs in the entire league. He can come inside. We showed a play from Eagles game plan this week where he did exactly this. He looped inside. So I think when you look at Jordan Milata, you've got the physical one-on-one matchups against Dupree and Hayward, but then you've got the mental gymnastics of the stunts, the blitzes. He and Nate Herbig together have got to do a good job of passing those things off in this game.
I think everything we've talked about is important for the Eagles today, but for me, what it comes down to after all of it is Carson Wentz building on the success from last week. And look, we talked about it. This is the number 2 total defense in the NFL. They just beat the number 3 total defense in the NFL last week against San Francisco. And how did they do it? The offensive line holding up against a really strong front. That's going to be a challenge again today. Getting the run game going, getting that creative play calling from Doug Peterson, the interesting scheme on offense, setting them up for success and building some momentum. And all of that at the end of the day goes through Carson Wentz. Doug Peterson mentioned earlier this week, Carson got a taste of winning. That's great for confidence. So as long as he's doing what he does best, whether that's using his legs when he needs to, throwing the ball away when that's the right decision, he loves to get that momentum from using his legs, throwing on the run. At the end of the day, it all comes down to Carson Wentz building on the success that worked against a talented defense last week. So I am looking at Carson Wentz today. But what about our team members, Mike Quick and Merrill Reese? Let's check in with the voice of the Eagles coming to us from Lincoln Financial Field.
Amy, Eagles football today, and we are ready to go. Waiting all week for a very, very important game. It's going to be an indicator game where we find out a lot about both of these teams. Michael, who is your player to watch?
Well, this week I'm going to focus on Nathan Gary. I do believe that the Steelers have great play at the tight end position, and they're going to need their linebackers, and not just Nathan, but all the linebackers, but I'll focus on Nathan Gary. They need their linebackers to kind of slow down McDonald and Eric Ebram, the tight ends of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Very good. Now, I am going to focus on old reliable Lane Johnson. My reason, he is facing one of the most dangerous pass rushers in the National Football League, TJ Watt. He is a handful. So that's how we stand, Amy. Have a great day.
Thank you, Merrill. Of course, I love Michael Quick picking Nathan Gary there today. We will use everyone's full names from here on. Just kidding. Fran mentioned it earlier. Eagles offensive tackle Jordan Milata will have another tough test today as he looks to build on his debut as an NFL starter. Milata has said he doesn't want to be thought of as a former rugby player. He wants to prove he is an NFL offensive lineman, and I'd say he's well on his way. Get to know this beloved Eagle a bit more in this week's one-on-one interview with Mike Quick, presented by Pondla Hockey.
Hey, Jordan, first of all, thank you for joining us. My first question is, you're a guy from Australian rugby. What makes you want to play football?
I was at a critical point in my life back home in Australia and just felt like I wasn't getting challenged or given the opportunity to kind of prove myself in the sport I was playing back home, back in rugby. And, my agent at the time knew someone that was part of this NFL program that kind of bridged the connection between other countries to try and grow the sport and influence people to watch the NFL and potentially learn the sport. Through that program, I ended up getting drafted by the Eagles from that program, so now I'm here.
That's pretty awesome. And you had your big debut, and I must tell you, I've watched the tape a couple of times. I was thoroughly impressed with your performance.
Oh, Thanks, mate.
Give us your assessment of your play in the run game as well as in the passing game. Give us a little bit of your assessment of your play.
Mate, after watching the game on the flight back home, I can say that I did some good things and also did some pretty bad things on the technical side. Like just cleaning up my footwork and hand placement on run drills and even pass blocking. There's a few times where I got caught punching. Just a couple things like that, just the hand placement and footwork that I needed to clean up. Well, overall, I was pretty proud of the way I played, but I knew that, watching the flight on the way home, it wasn't going to be perfect. As long as I gave it everything I had on each play, because that's how I focused. Each play was 4 seconds, focused for 4 seconds. But again, really hard on myself, so technique-wise, I just had to clean it up.
Man, how hard can you be? 2.5 years ago, you didn't even know how to put the gear on. You'd never worn a football uniform. And so now you're starting on the biggest regular season stage, Sunday Night Football. Tell me about the nerves. You find out the day before the game that you're going to be a starter. Tell me about the nerves going into that game.
The nerves only hit me, and I don't really call it nerves. I just call it, let's call it jitters, because I wasn't nervous. When I found out the day before, I really wasn't nervous. I was just like, okay, this is cool. Finally, my time has come, and hopefully I step up.
The ultimate is to win the Super Bowl, help this team to win the Super Bowl. But when you think about it on a personal level, what do you want to accomplish in this game on a personal level?
The first goal that I had, that I accomplished this year, was to start a game. It's funny that you brought it up, because I was just thinking about this on the flight back home. I was thinking about what my next goal would be. And I think it's just to cement my legacy as the dude who went from a rugby player to a football player. I think that's my next goal, to try and be more consistent on plays, every play, to be more effective for my team and win a Super Bowl, essentially.
You're going to face one of the #1 defenses in all of football. Stephen Tuitt, Dupree, T.J. Watt, all of these names are going to be coming at you. What is it that makes that defense of the Steelers so good?
I think just the way they play, technique-wise, really good at running stunts. Watching the film this week, individually, they're all a threat. And when you combine them in stunts, it makes it even harder. So that's one thing that we've been working on this week, is trying to perfect our passing off the stunts and really expecting what to do when we're man on man.
When they're running those stunts, they got the TE and the ET stunt where they're crossing in front of you. And I noticed how good your footwork is when you're passing those guys off. How did you come about that?
That's Coach Stout. All the credit goes to Coach Stout. He makes sure that we are on the perfect set lines. And what he means by that, me and the guard, if we have the perfect relationship when we're setting off the line, we're able to pass off the stunts. It goes back to technique again, the technique details I was talking about. I'm trying to fine-tune those and make sure that I'm on spot this week. So, yeah, all the credit goes to Coach Stout.
All right, so Fran, what I want to highlight first with Jordan Milata is I don't think it can be overstated the progress that he has made at an offensive tackle position, which is one of the most developmental positions in all of football. It takes a lot of time. What he has done in such a short time is pretty remarkable to be an NFL starter after just 3 years of ever playing the game.
And that's the thing, is that last week wasn't his first NFL start. It was his first start playing the sport.
Right.
Like, I mean, it's insane to think about, but it really speaks to the work that he's put in, the work that the coaching staff, namely offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland, has put in. You can't get there without both sides working as hard as they have. And I think when you look at Jordan Milata, I talked about it earlier, all the physical tools are there. Now it's a matter of, okay, building off of that, because now that the Steelers have a week's worth of film on him, they're going to see some of the technical flaws. So they're going to see some of the things he was a little bit slow to react to. And you can guarantee that's what they're going to throw at him here today. So I'm excited to see how he responds in his second action.
Well, what I love was that he said he thinks it's going to be a great challenge that they have some film on him. So he, of course, has that attitude of constantly wanting to improve. Let's talk a little bit about Coach Stoutland. As he's developed this offensive line, it's not just Jordan Milata. He's developed so many guys. How valuable is it to have a coach like that on your staff?
Yeah, I think when you have any season, you're always going to have attrition along the offensive line. This year is a little bit of an anomaly because the Eagles have had so much attrition in that group, but you always needed to be developing, and the Eagles know the importance of that. So you're always going to be drafting players. You're going to be hitting the waiver wire. They did that this week with Brett Toth, bringing him back into the fold off the waiver wire from Arizona. So, when you have a teacher like Jeff Stoutland, he's always going to try and maximize what you're getting out of those young players, and I think Milata is just the latest example.
Well, and these guys love to work hard for him, too, so it's that mutual respect that you love to see there. All right, I have to remind Eagles fans about a very exciting opportunity. Do not miss your chance to be in the stands at Lincoln Financial Field this season. Eagles fan cutouts are still available. They cost just $100, and all net proceeds benefit the Eagles Autism Foundation. You can order yours at philadelphiaeagles.com/cutout. So, Fran, do you have an update on your cutout? Is it ready to go?
I do have an update. Mine is ready to go. It's over in the office. We'll be seeing it soon on our Eagles Entertainment channels. But yeah, if we were in person, I might have just been still and pretend I was a cutout. But hey, that's not going to play in our current situation.
No, we have a lot of rules to follow, which is great. I also probably need to get on the cutout game as well. All right, before we share our final thoughts on today's matchup, we are going to take a quick break. We will see you in about 30 seconds. The Philadelphia Eagles and Axalta Coating Systems are building a roster of all-pro teachers. Go to philadelphiaeagles.com/Axalta All-Pro Teachers to learn more. And as we get closer to game time, here's a guy who's excited to be back in Pittsburgh. A couple of guys excited to be back in Pittsburgh. Deuce Staley back at his former team, and Miles Sanders in his hometown, both with the Eagles today. And here's Boston Scott, of course, ready to get that run game going against a very, very tough Steelers front. It's going to be an exciting challenge for this Eagles offense. And this is your reminder that it is just 15 minutes until kickoff. Fran, I think you have some great advice for everyone on what they can do between now and then.
Yeah, only 15 minutes left until kickoff. So you could spend those 15 minutes saving 15% or more on car insurance just by switching to Geico.
Love it, Fran. Thanks so much for that great advice. All right, remember everyone, we will be right back here as soon as the game is over to break it all down. Ike Reese will join us, and we'll of course have coach and players live as well as instant reaction from the Eagles-Steelers matchup. The 80th Battle of Pennsylvania is just a few minutes away. So for Fran Duffy and our team, I am Amy Campbell, and we will see you on the other side.